Elara Lewis screamed as Raymond plasma bolts shredded her tiny body, executing the 6-year-old human girl for stealing food on a Riemann world. Humanity seethed with rage, secretly preparing to shatter galactic peace to avenge an innocent child. Elara's father Lawrence watched his daughter's brutal murder, his heart filling with fiery vengeance against the cold, unfeeling insectoid aliens. The Raymonds were a cruel species who cared nothing for the hungry cries of a starving child, only for their draconian laws. Lawrence had come to the Riemanns as an ambassador, hoping to forge a fragile peace between the races under the Galactic Council. Now, as he cradled Elara's shredded corpse, he vowed to bring ruthless war instead. The Galactic Council thought humans were a weak, subjugated client race, harmless and ripe for exploitation. They were wrong. Earth had a secret, one that would soon shake the foundations of the galaxy, a hidden fleet of powerful warships built in the far reaches of the solar system. Sleek destroyers, heavily armored dreadnoughts, and nimble corvettes, all armed to the teeth and crewed by the angriest humans alive. Humans who had toiled under the Council's bondage for too long, their resentment boiling into genocidal rage. Now one of their children, an innocent girl, had been executed in cold blood for a petty crime. The galaxy had no idea of the monster it had just awoken. The Council would soon regret their cruelty, as humanity's wrathful fleet exploded out of the shadows to burn worlds and blacken suns. Lawrence would lead that fleet, driven by the searing pain in his heart for his murdered daughter. He had quietly contacted Earth's leaders, showing them a father's agonized tears mixed with an admiral's cold resolve. Humanity's greatest commanders saw the savagery in Lawrence's eyes and the conviction in his words. They knew the time had come to unleash their terrible secret and show the galaxy what it meant to spill human blood. No longer would humanity suffer as slaves to capricious alien laws. No longer would helpless children be butchered by soulless alien killers. The age of retribution had come, one of cleansing fire and human fury. If humanity unleashed its secret armada, it would mean all-out war against the galaxy. But it was a war they would win, or perish in the attempt. The Council had given them no choice. If humans were to survive and their children live free, they must teach the galaxy to fear mankind's wrath, even if it meant the stars would burn and 1,000,000 worlds bathed in blood. As Earth prepared to unleash its terrible secret, Lawrence sat in his quarters aboard the hidden flagship, staring at a picture of Elara. Rage and sorrow battled within him, threatening to rip him apart. He slammed a fist on the table, making the frame jump. Those fucking roaches would pay. A chime from the door interrupted his dark thoughts. Lawrence frowned. No one should be disturbing him at this hour. He stood, striding to the door and slapping the release. It slid open to reveal a familiar face, one he hadn't seen in years. "Zoran?" Lawrence hissed in disbelief. "What the hell are you doing here?" The Rayman held up his clawed hands in a gesture of peace. "I come as a friend, Lawrence. I have vital information for your war effort." Lawrence narrowed his eyes. He and Zoran had worked together in the Galactic Council, true, but that was a lifetime ago, before the Riemanns murdered his little girl. "And why should I trust a goddamn roach like you?" "Because not all of us supported the Council's decision regarding your daughter." Zoran's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. "Many of us were horrified by what they did. We want to help you tear it all down." Lawrence studied Zoran for a long moment, searching for any hint of deception. He found none. Slowly he stepped aside, allowing the Riemann to enter. "Talk." Over the next hour, Zoran laid out everything he knew about the Riemann Empire's defenses, from the number and location of their ships to the codes needed to bypass their security systems. He told Lawrence of a rebel faction within the government, one that had been working to undermine the Emperor's rule. "With my knowledge and your fleet," Zoran said, "we can strike a blow they'll never recover from." Lawrence leaned back in his chair, mind racing with possibilities. He still didn't fully trust Zoran, but he couldn't deny the value of the intel. And if there were Riemanns willing to fight against their own kind... he met Zoran's compound eyes. "What's your plan?" Together, they crafted a strategy to hit the Remans where it hurt. The Earth fleet would engage their ships in orbit, drawing them away from the planet. Meanwhile, Lawrence would lead a strike team to the surface, targeting key military installations and government buildings. They'd use the rebel faction's intel to slip past the defenses and plant explosives at critical points. With any luck, they could cripple the Reman war machine and open the door for a full-scale invasion. As the plan took shape, Lawrence felt a savage grin spread across his face. Soon he'd have his revenge. Soon the galaxy would tremble before the might of humanity. The Earth fleet burst out of hiding, shooting toward the Reman homeworld at full burn. It was a magnificent sight, hundreds of ships bristling with weapons and filled with men and women thirsty for Reman blood. Lawrence stood in the hangar bay of the flagship, checking his weapon one last time. Around him, his hand-picked team did the same, their faces grim and determined. They were the best of the best, each one a hardened veteran of a dozen conflicts. They'd follow him into the jaws of hell itself if he asked. "This is it," he said, his voice carrying through the hangar. "Today we strike a blow for every human who suffered under Reman tyranny. Today we avenge my daughter." A cheer went up from the assembled soldiers, a roar of pure, primal rage. The ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, the hull glowing cherry red from the friction. Lawrence gripped his rifle tighter. Almost there. With a bone-rattling impact, the ship touched down on the outskirts of the Reman capital. The ramp lowered, and Lawrence charged out into the fray, his team close behind. Plasma bolts filled the air as the Reman defenders opened fire, their insectoid faces twisted with hate. Lawrence dove for cover behind a ruined wall, popping up to send a burst of fire towards the nearest enemy position. A satisfying scream told him he'd found his mark. All around him, his team was doing the same, leapfrogging from cover to cover as they advanced toward the city center. The Remans fought back with everything they had, energy weapons scorching the air and force fields shimmering as they absorbed the incoming fire. But the humans would not be denied. Inch by bloody inch they pushed forward, leaving a trail of Reman corpses in their wake. Lawrence was a man possessed, his rifle spitting death with every squeeze of the trigger. In his mind's eye he saw Ilara's face, her innocent smile, her lifeless body lying in a pool of her own blood. The rage consumed him, driving him on like a berserker of old. He would not stop until every last Reman lay dead at his feet. Above them, the Earth fleet was locked in a desperate battle with the Reman ships. Even with the element of surprise, it was a close thing. The Remans had numbers on their side, and their ships were more maneuverable, darting in and out of the human formation like angry wasps. But the humans had something the Remans did not, a righteous fury that burned hotter than 1,000 suns. They fought with a savage abandon, ramming their ships into the enemy vessels when their weapons ran dry. One by one the Reman ships fell, torn apart by the human onslaught. The debris rained down on the planet below, the wreckage of a once proud fleet. On the ground, Lawrence and his team had fought their way to the steps of the Imperial Palace. As they paused to catch their breath, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the Reman Emperor himself, clad in ornate battle armor and wielding a crackling energy blade. "How you dare invade my world, human?" the Emperor hissed. "You will pay for your insolence with your lives." Lawrence stepped forward, his rifle held loosely at his side. "You murdered my daughter," he said, his voice cold as the void. "You and your kind have oppressed and enslaved humanity for too long. No more." The Emperor lunged, moving with blinding speed, but Lawrence was faster. He brought his rifle up and fired, the plasma bolt catching the Reman square in the chest. The Emperor staggered back, a smoking hole in his armor. Lawrence advanced, still firing. The Emperor's energy blade flashed, deflecting the bolts, but it was a losing battle. One bolt found its mark, then another, and another. The Emperor collapsed to his knees, dark blood pooling around him. Lawrence stood over his fallen foe, rifle aimed at the Reman's head. He could end it now with a single pull of the trigger, but that would be too quick, too painless. The Emperor needed to suffer, as Ilara had suffered. "You will pay for what you've done," Lawrence said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You and all your kind. Humanity will never again bow to alien tyranny. We will—" Lawrence snarled with fury, his rifle trained on the Emperor's head. "We will never again be slaves." The Emperor laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "You fool, you think you've won? You know nothing." He tapped a button on his wrist, and a hologram flickered to life above them. It showed a massive, pulsing orb of energy, housed deep within the planet's core. "Behold," the Emperor said, "the true power of the Riemann Empire, a superweapon capable of destroying entire worlds, and I control it." Lawrence's eyes widened in horror. "You monster! You destroy your own planet, kill billions of your own people?" "To maintain my grip on the galaxy?" Without hesitation. The Emperor sneered. "And it's all thanks to you, human. Your daughter's death was the perfect catalyst to push your species into war, a war that will end with the Riemann Empire ruling supreme." Lawrence's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "I ordered your daughter's execution," the Emperor said. "She was a threat to my plans. Her death ensured your cooperation." Lawrence roared with rage, dropping his rifle and leaping at the Emperor. They crashed to the ground, locked in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Lawrence pummeled the Riemann with his fists, pouring all his grief and anger into every blow. But the Emperor was strong, his exoskeleton absorbing the impacts. He threw Lawrence off and rose to his feet, activating his energy blade. "The Galactic Council are pawns," he snarled. "I have manipulated them for years to maintain my power, and now with this superweapon I will bring the galaxy to its knees." He lunged at Lawrence, his blade humming. Lawrence rolled aside, snatching up his rifle and firing point blank. The bolts seared the Emperor's armor but didn't penetrate. Lawrence keyed his comm. "All ships, concentrate fire on the palace. We have to take out the superweapons controls." The fleet acknowledged, and moments later the sky lit up with plasma bolts and missile contrails. The palace shook under the onslaught, chunks of masonry raining down around them. But the Emperor kept coming, his blade flashing. Lawrence parried desperately with his rifle, the metal sizzling where the energy blade touched it. The Emperor pressed his advantage, driving Lawrence back with a flurry of blows. Lawrence's foot caught on a piece of rubble and he stumbled, his rifle flying from his grasp. The Emperor loomed over him, blade raised for the killing blow. Lawrence closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But it didn't come. He heard a grunt of pain and opened his eyes to see Zoran standing over him, the Emperor's blade buried in his chest. "Zoran!" Lawrence scrambled to his feet as the Riemann crumpled. "Why?" "Because—" Zoran coughed, dark blood bubbling from his mouth. "You were right. My people have lost their way. You must stop him." Lawrence nodded grimly, picking up his rifle. The Emperor was struggling to his feet, his armor dented and scorched. Lawrence glanced at the hologram, still showing the pulsing superweapon. The fleet was making progress, the palace's shields flickering under their assault. But it wasn't enough. He turned to his team, battered but unbroken. "We have to get inside, take out that weapon at its source. It's the only way." They nodded, checking their weapons. Lawrence took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. "For Ilara," he whispered, "for humanity, for every species ground under the Emperor's heel, today we fight." With a roar of defiance, they charged into the breach, Lawrence leading the way. The Emperor rallied his guards, energy weapons flashing. But there was no stopping the human tide, not now. They would end this once and for all. The Riemann Empire would fall and humanity would rise, and Lawrence would finally have his vengeance. Lawrence charged towards the superweapons control room, his team close behind. They blasted through the reinforced doors, storming inside with rifles raised. The Emperor's elite guard was waiting for them, a phalanx of heavily armored Riemann warriors armed with crackling energy pikes. "Take them out!" Lawrence roared, opening fire. Plasma bolts lit up the room as the two forces clashed. The Riemanns were skilled and fanatically loyal, fighting with a ferocity born of absolute devotion to their Emperor. But Lawrence's team was just as determined, and they had the advantage of surprise and superior weaponry. They pushed forward, taking down the guards one by one with precise shots and brutal hand-to-hand combat. Lawrence was a whirlwind of destruction, his rifle and fists smashing through Raymond armor like it was made of paper. Suddenly a massive figure loomed out of the smoke and chaos. It was Krios, the Emperor's cyborg enforcer. Half Raymond, half machine, he was a nightmarish fusion of flesh and metal. His eyes burned with a deep personal hatred as he locked onto Lawrence. "You!" Krios snarled. "You're the one who killed my Emperor." Lawrence felt a surge of rage at the sight of his daughter's murderer. "And you're the one who killed my little girl," he growled. Krios let out a metallic roar and charged, energy blade flashing. Lawrence met him head-on, parrying the blow with his rifle. The two warriors traded a furious series of strikes, sparks flying as their weapons clashed. Krios was incredibly strong and fast, his cybernetic enhancements giving him an edge. But Lawrence was driven by a father's righteous fury, and he matched the cyborg blow for blow. Around them, the battle raged on as Lawrence's team fought to clear the room. The countdown to the superweapons firing ticked down with merciless speed. Lawrence knew he had to end this fast. He feinted left, then ducked right as Krios's blade hummed through the space where his head had been. The cyborg overextended, thrown off balance. Lawrence seized the opening, slamming his rifle butt into Krios's face with a sickening crunch. As Krios staggered back, Lawrence leapt past him, diving for the superweapons control panel. He slammed his fist into the hardened metal, his cybernetic implants interfacing with the alien technology. There was a blinding flash of pain as the system's defenses lashed out, overloading his circuits. Lawrence screamed, his body convulsing with agony. But he held on, pouring every ounce of his will into the task. His implants burned white-hot as they battled the superweapons security protocols. With a final, desperate surge, Lawrence broke through. The panel flashed red, warning sirens blaring as he initiated the self-destruct sequence. "No!" Krios howled, lunging at Lawrence. But it was too late. The room shook as the superweapon began to tear itself apart from within. Explosions rocked the palace, the entire structure starting to come down around them. Lawrence staggered to his feet, his body racked with pain. His implants were fried, the feedback from the system leaving him barely able to stand. But he was alive, and he had done it. The superweapon was destroyed. "We have to go now," he yelled to his team. They fell back, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they fled the crumbling palace. Chunks of masonry crashed down around them, the Riemann guards still in hot pursuit. Lawrence stumbled, his vision going black at the edges. One of his soldiers caught him, hauling him up and dragging him along. They burst out of the palace just as it collapsed behind them, a massive cloud of dust and debris billowing into the sky. Lawrence's team kept running, plasma bolts sizzling past them as the last few Riemann guards gave chase. A bolt clipped Lawrence's leg, and he went down hard, his vision swimming with pain. His soldiers clustered around him, laying down covering fire. Lawrence tried to stand, but his body wouldn't respond. The damage from the control panel had been too severe. He could feel his systems shutting down one by one, his life ebbing away. "Leave me," he rasped. "Get to the evac point. Complete the mission." His team shook their heads, still firing at the approaching Raymonds. They wouldn't leave him behind, not after all they'd been through together. Lawrence felt a surge of pride and love for these brave men and women. They were more than his soldiers. They were his family. He summoned the last of his strength, forcing himself to his feet. If he was going to die, he would do it standing tall, fighting to the last. He raised his rifle, the weapon shaking in his hands. The Raymonds were closing in, their energy weapons blazing. This was it. One last stand for humanity, for the galaxy, for Ilara. Lawrence gritted his teeth and opened fire, the plasma bolts lighting up the smoke-filled air. Beside him, his team did the same, pouring out a relentless stream of destruction. The Raymonds fell, their advance faltering under the onslaught. But more kept coming, an endless tide of insectoid warriors bent on vengeance for their fallen emperor. Lawrence's rifle clicked empty. He let it fall, drawing his sidearm. His vision was fading, his limbs growing heavy. He could hear his heartbeat slowing, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. The end was near, he could feel it. But he would not go gently. He would fight to his last breath, take as many of these bastards with him as he could. A plasma bolt struck him in the chest, burning through his armor. Lawrence staggered, dropping to one knee. Another bolt hit him, then another. He toppled backwards, his gun falling from his hand. Above him, the sky was a roiling mass of smoke and flame, the remnants of the Riemann fleet still battling the Earth ships in orbit. Lawrence smiled through the pain, a grim satisfaction filling him. They had won. Humanity had risen up and shattered the shackles of alien oppression. His daughter's death had been avenged, and the galaxy would never again underestimate the strength and fury of the human race. His vision dimmed, the sounds of battle fading away. In their place he heard a voice achingly familiar. "Daddy?" Elara. She was waiting for him on the other side. Lawrence closed his eyes, letting out a final breath. "I'm coming, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy's coming home." The superweapon's detonation shook the very planet. The palace vaporized instantly as a hellish shockwave tore through the city, leveling buildings and incinerating all in its path. From orbit, the Riemann capital looked like a miniature sun had ignited on the surface, a churning inferno that devoured everything. Lawrence and his team sprinted for their lives, the heat of the blast licking at their backs. They dove into a Riemann shuttle just as the wave hit, the force slamming them against the walls. Alarms blared as the engine strained against the maelstrom. Lawrence hauled himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as he wrenched it into the sky. They rocketed away from the surface, the shock wave nipping at their heels. Behind them the city crumbled into ash and molten glass. Lawrence looked back, his heart heavy. So much death, so much destruction. But it had to be done. For Elara, for humanity. As they broke orbit, they saw the remnants of the Earth fleet, battered and bruised but victorious. Riemann ships drifted in ruins, the once mighty armada reduced to scrap. They had won. But the cost... Lawrence slumped in his seat, pain lancing through his body. The feedback from the control panel had done a number on him. His implants sparked and sputtered, his vision flickering. He could feel himself slipping away, the darkness closing in. "Hold on, sir." One of his soldiers gripped his shoulder. "We'll get you to a medic, just stay with us." But Lawrence couldn't. The last thing he saw before the void took him was Elara's face, smiling at him from across the stars. He awoke to the steady beep of a heart monitor. He was in a hospital bed, his body wrapped in bandages and tubes. A doctor stood over him, her face grim. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. "Your implants were fried. We had to replace half your body with cybernetics just to keep you going." Lawrence tried to speak, but his throat was raw. The doctor held up a hand. "Don't try to talk. You've been in a coma for weeks. A lot has happened." She told him of the aftermath of the war. With the Riemann Empire shattered and the Galactic Council exposed as corrupt, the power structure of the galaxy had shifted. Humanity, once downtrodden and oppressed, now found itself in a position of leadership. But not all were happy with this new order. Riemann loyalists, led by a fanatical warlord, had sworn vengeance against humanity. They struck from the shadows, targeting human colonies and outposts. The galaxy, it seemed, was still far from peace. As the days turned to weeks, Lawrence struggled to come to terms with all that had happened. He was hailed as a hero by humanity, the savior who had broken the shackles of alien tyranny. But to many other species, he was a villain, a butcher who had slaughtered millions. The weight of it all pressed down on him, crushing him. Elara's death, while avenged, still haunted his every waking moment, and now, to learn that it had all been part of some twisted conspiracy, a ploy by shadowy figures to weaken both humanity and the Riemanns. Lawrence clenched his fists, rage and grief warring within him. He had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, all for a lie. The true enemy, it seemed, was still out there, pulling the strings from the darkness. He knew what he had to do. He would find them, these puppet masters who had played the galaxy like a chessboard. He would make them pay for every life lost, every drop of blood spilled. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, those he could trust. And in this brave new world where the lines between friend and foe were blurred, that was a tall order. Lawrence took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in his ribs. It didn't matter. Pain was an old friend, one he had grown accustomed to. He would endure, as he always had. For Ilara, for humanity, and for the chance to look the true architects of this war in the eye before he put a plasma bolt between them. The road ahead would be long and hard, fraught with danger and deceit, but Lawrence was a soldier, a warrior forged in the fires of battle. He would not rest until justice was done, no matter the cost. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the doctor's protests. He had a mission, a purpose that burned in his veins. The galaxy thought it knew Lawrence Shaw, the hero, the butcher. But they hadn't seen anything yet. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.